This episode is sponsored by PACS, the gold standard in emergency response bags. So when you're working under pressure, you need kit to be both dependable, tough and intuitive, and that's exactly what you get with PACS. Every bag is handcrafted by expert tailors who understand the demands of personal care, from the high-tech, skin-friendly and environmentally responsible materials to the cutting-edge welding process that reduces seams and makes cleaning easier. PACS absolutely puts performance first. They've partnered with 3M to make perfect reflective surfaces for better visibility, and bright grey interior makes finding kit effortless and fast even in low light. With over 200 designs, PACS bags are made to suit your role, your needs and your environment. And thanks to their modular system, many bags work seamlessly together no matter the setup. PACS doesn't chase trends, their designs stay consistent, so once you know one, you know them all. And if your bag ever takes a beating, their in-house repair team will bring it back to life. PACS are built to perform, made to last. Learn more at pacs-bags.com or head to the show notes for further details.
You're listening to the Pre-Hospital Care podcast on the Medics Academy Network.
Welcome back to the podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about rehabilitation of pre-hospital staff with Mike Palmer. So today we're really going to tackle an often overlooked but crucial topic of rehabilitation, really looking at the psychological and physical toll of working on the front line in pre-hospital care. So paramedics, HEMS crew and pre-hospital responders routinely face high stress environments, heavy lifting, unpredictable conditions and repeated exposure to trauma. But just true to say, what happens to the body and or mind when it says enough? And indeed, how do we support colleagues in their recovery to ensure that they return to work stronger, healthier and more resilient? So joining me today is Mike Palmer. He's a seasoned critical care clinician with first-hand experience of injury and recovery. So in the podcast, what we're going to do is really explore the scale of injury within pre-hospital care, some of the gaps in current rehabilitation, why a structured, individualized approach to convalescence and recovery is essential for long-term career sustainability. We're going to take a deep dive also into Mike's organic rehabilitation journey, how he found his own path to recovery, and indeed the challenges he's faced along the way. Welcome, Mike, to the podcast.
Thanks, Owen. Thanks for having me back. And as you know, I'm a great fan, so I'm happy to be here.
I just wondered initially, let's just look at the scale of the problem maybe within pre-hospital care of injury and rehabilitation. Could I get you to look at the prevalence really, or speak to the prevalence of injuries amongst pre-hospital staff and indeed maybe some of the most common physical and or mental challenges they face?
I think firstly, Owen, I think it's probably quite hard to know the full extent. Even taking a little bit of a kind of dive into the literature, it's often really kind of, you can argue that it's probably sometimes quite unreported, whether that's the right thing or wrong thing, whether, even if it's like a near miss. And then sometimes even if you do something, it might be kind of look as kind of unfavorable towards like your colleagues. But as I kind of know quite rightly, injuries sometimes happen quite sudden, but I think a lot of the time really is a lot of injuries are chronic. I think that's where we kind of come from really today in the start of it really, is that, injuries are often as a build up of years, decades really. And it's really kind of like underpinning why you have that injury, why it kind of stops you from working, or what the root of that cause is. But as we know, it's we've got the high demanding of the job, high stress. You got the nights, but then we often think that why do people have these injuries? And it's often the back, the neck, the knee, and the shoulders. And even if you look at the literature, really a systematic review found that 56 of EMS services or personnel suffer with musculoskeletal injuries. And then even, the highest one is the lower back of 47%. And, even if we take a bit of a side step away from pre-hospital care and you look at even nurses, nurses, 10 years ago, you could probably say it didn't really exist pre-hospitally. But now we've got, I work with many nurses, often, even with the physician response unit in London as well, there's many nurses there as well. But even the World Health Organization states that there's 72% of nurses suffer with chronic lower back pain. And that's even, a little bit of a shout out to my sister. She's been a nurse now for over 15 years and she's had various back problems. And then they often say it's often to stress, night shifts. even being married is a high risk factor apparently. So no, I think we're all aware of what the extent is, but I think the idea going forward is how we stop that.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Just really interesting. We were just talking offline also, and this kind of tees me up for the second question, really around the mental stresses of working in principal care. Like you said, days, nights, late, earlys, weekends, lots of unsocial hours, and just the burden on the circadian rhythm, on your sleep patterns, and just the as you said, the longevity of that, the impact of that chronically. Could I get you to speak to the impact that, from your perspective, really, Mike, that the job has on mental health of paramedics and transport staff?
Mm. No, it's an interesting question because I feel like when you've do night shifts, it's a mindset, isn't it? Typically for years we do that, 4 night shifts in a row, and I often thought, oh, by the third or fourth, you're tapping out, aren't you? And then even some people even go even longer, and even if you look at old kind of rotas of even physicians in the hospital environment, they're sometimes doing 7 or 8 nights. But I feel what's really, really important is making sure you get into the rhythm of something. So, like, when I'm doing my night shifts, I eat at the same time. I have that regular pattern. I try and stay away from any of those kind of like those sugary, kind of high insulin spike foods. So I have my whole grains, and even though it's so tempting to have those sweets, yeah, I try and stay away with them really. But even now, having a quick look online, there was a Unison study that 62% of ambulance staff reported that their job caused stress and anxiety. And then even a paper in the Journal of Paramedic Science said that half of paramedics are thinking about quitting the profession. And these are hard facts, really, aren't they? But what can we do? I think making sure you've got that a support network around you from your peers, your colleagues, even your work home environment is needs to be important. And kind of bringing in, the big element, or why I'm probably here today, is injuries in sports, is how important fitness is, and getting your heart rate up.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. So let's just, before we really look at your organic journey, Mike, into rehabilitation, could I get you to speak to maybe how current systems of support are helping injured staff recover and return to duty? Just if you, maybe from your experience of being in a number of systems, really, and a number of services. Could I get you to speak to your experience of support mechanisms to help staff return to duty?
Mm. Yeah, and I think with I've been very lucky with the injuries well, the operations I've had. I've managed to kind of rehab them through them. We I've had a various array of physios over the years, and even then, having a good physio was paramount for my recovery going forward. I remember my surgeons telling me a couple of years ago that I've done my job now. And it's 20% of the actual kind of recovery process. The rest of the 80% is all down to you now. And you always think in your head, or get it fixed if it's orthopedic surgery or whatever, and you end up thinking, oh, that's it now. I'm fixed. But it's really not. It's making sure you've got that process through that system. And initially, the NHS is there, and they provide physio, for example, but they're only there really to bring you back to your activities of daily living. Can you wash your hair? Can you clean your teeth? But what's really difficult is where you need to kind of, what for me, I had to step away from that afterwards, after going through that journey, because I needed more than that. I needed to go back to work. I needed to lift, and I wanted to continue my sport and hobbies as they are really, to help me with my mindset, my moods, and that's what's going to help me going forward. But going back to work, you have your occupational health therapy, you have your relationship with your managers, and I think that's really fundamentally really important, is to have that manager that can support you through that process. Definitely.
And so, just looking at some of the gaps in rehabilitation, Mike, is there any significant gaps that you see today? Like you said, it's actually the surgical intervention is only 20%, and the rest is that convalescence. That the rest, the rehabilitation, and indeed the engagement with physiotherapy, maybe indeed even occupational therapy, depending on what age you are and what needs you have around you to facilitate getting back to work. But could I get you to speak to maybe some of the gaps that you see in rehabilitation at the moment?
Yes, yeah, I feel like with the gaps is what I kind of said is that it's expectations, and you need to be clear from the off is what my expectation is. In extreme, you have a shoulder surgery and you want to go back to lifting a certain weight on a bench press, for example. It's that expectation, and that was for me. I wanted to go back. First time I had a surgery, I wanted to go back and go back to competitive kind of CrossFit. That's what my goal was at the time. And now my goal really long term is longevity and long term health. And that's what I kind of really want to kind of push today really is to, yes, we all have chapters in our lives and we're all in our 20s and we have a great time, and we maybe don't have that best sleep kind of pattern, or we might overindulge on for a certain kind of alcohol or bad food, for example. But when you're in, as you know, when you're in your 30s or your 40s, we need to kind of like balance those aspects to kind of have your thinking of your longevity care into your 50s and 60s going forward.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So before we really double click on your organic journey, actually, Mike, just the final question around generically would be around if you could just speak to, how good rehabilitation frameworks, system ambulance service frameworks really not only support individuals, but I guess in a way the longevity of the whole workforce. Because to your point, it is an individualized care and it's an individualized, you have to own your own rehabilitation journey. But I think in a way that both policy and indeed structure can support, I guess, the masses and the larger workforce. Could I get you to speak to how a stronger framework and or policy can really improve longevity of the wider workforce?
Yeah, I feel we have been probably slightly behind. I think over the years, if you stepped into an ambulance station 10 years ago, you'd never think that there would be a gym there. But fast forward now, we've got the hazard area response team, and nationally that you have to do a 6 monthly fitness test. That's been set in kind of as a standard now, really. But even now here in Wales, we have gyms that access away from the hazard area response team. But even that aside, it's 10, 15 years ago, did we have the lifting aids that we have now? These sliding sheets, these banana boards, these extra straps, these MIBs, multi-integrated body stretchers, that, and then daily sessions on how to lift correctly, etc. So I think it's improving, but I think we're not quite there yet. But it's definitely something that we all need to take ownership for ourselves of as well. I think, yes, we need to do certain awkward lifts. I think that's always going to be the case, really, isn't it? But how can we, yes, train, for, outside of work for in work, but are we doing it for work really, or are we doing for, yeah, as we said earlier, the future of Mike and Owen really, and looking after ourselves.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Let's just look at your personal experience actually, Mike, with injury and how it's impacted your role. Could you just speak it or just indeed walk us through your personal experience of injury and rehabilitation? What happened and what's it looking like?
Yeah, a bit of disclaimer before I say anything really is that all my injuries haven't happened in work, so that's got to be there really. But I feel, as I said at the start of the podcast, we don't know whether these things are acute or chronic really, and that's an honest and opinion of it all really. But I know I've had issues with my shoulders for over the years, and I've managed to rupture both sides of my bicep. So yeah, from the proximal side as well as my distal side. and then a various kind of like labour and repairs as well. So that's going to be probably years from swimming. I used to be quite a competitive swimmer when I was younger, and then kind of taking quite like a forward stance on my training with CrossFit and functional training really. But yeah, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I was probably going to the gym, definitely every day, maybe even twice a day, really. And that's what's really kind of happened. And I feel like it's been a build up of probably work and also the chronic nights. But then also I'm trying to be as much of a competitive kind of like athlete outside of work. And I think the two and two we need to be really careful with. And I think holding my hands up, I think over the years I've probably, I always say about having how many matches you've got in a day to strike, and you probably only got one or two of them. And I was probably, going through a whole box of matches some days, really. Yes, for a love of it and enjoyment, but I probably wasn't showing the respect some of my tendons that I was probably needed to at the time.
Yeah, indeed, indeed.
Mm.
So let's just look at your rehabilitation journey, actually, Mike. And indeed, you've mentioned about laying claim to ownership, really, of your rehabilitation journey. And I absolutely believe in that. Could I get you to speak to your approach to rehabilitation and indeed what point you realized you needed maybe a more holistic recovery method to really, I guess, embrace all aspects of rehabilitation that might facilitate a quicker and or speedier recovery.
Yeah, I feel like it's all about anything, even if it's not even talking about this subject, it's about your controllables. And I feel at the start of the injury or the recovery process is that what can I do and what can't I do? And at that time, really post surgery, you're there, you're in a sling, and you often think, right, what can I do? And I can't, weight train, or I can't really get my heart rate elevated up. I don't really feel like it because I'm on kind of some post-op kind of drugs, really. But I feel like what I can do is my diet. That's what I can really kind of nail down, and then my sleep. That's one of the two things, my two controls I could do straight away. So the classic of people go on about this now is that the 7 to 9 hours of sleep you need to try to aim to that every night. And then the whole thing of what I've kind of started doing now is not having a mobile phone in the bedroom. At 8 o'clock at night, I'm trying to be off my phone, and that stays downstairs as well. And then for that period of like 8 o'clock onwards, I'm not being on my phone. Is getting rid of that kind of blue lights out of the bedroom, and then having that kind of really nice circadian rhythm. We can't change the fact that we're pre-hospitalists, we do night shifts, but now obviously I'm off for a period of work at the moment and off on night duties, so I'm not doing nights. So I've got into this really nice rhythm, Owen, of getting up at 6 a.m. every day, and come half 8, 9 o'clock at night, I'm falling asleep. And it's been a really nice period, really, and that's what I could really focus on is that good sleep hygiene, and then that diet, really. And even when you look at what kind of diets we should be having, and even if you don't really know what to eat, if you just look at even like the Mediterranean diet, or even aspects of like food we're like labeling, if something's got a label, it's probably potentially kind of processed some way, really. So it's making sure you get those lean meats, your fish, your poultry, your greens, vegetables. So that's my initial kind of aspect, really, of what I could do. And then, yeah, going forward, then it's making sure that I've kind of got somebody, in my crew, on my side that can help me through this process, and finding that good physio was the next thing, really. And then having them as a bit of like an agony aunt, so I can to ask them certain questions. Then also, giving them me that framework of like, okay, we're going to be here at 4 weeks. We're going to be here at 8 weeks or 12 weeks. We're singing, and having that mindset of like one step at a time, and little steps are actually really, really big steps sometimes, and having that there ready, ready for you.
That's fantastic. And like you said, it speaks to realigning expectations, but it also speaks to taking, like you said, Mike, micro steps and actually not trying to either return too quickly or indeed too slowly, but certainly not too quickly, which can have a risk in re-injury of your significant initial injury. But those really one thing I like about that is there's instead of the conventional approaches, which might be focused absolutely on the services provided, it's actually, like you said, looking at the wider aspect of sleep and nutrition and engaging in realigning your expectations, lots of reading around the subject. And something I really appreciated about your journey, Mike, which you shared with me, was engaging with the surgeon post-operatively to gain access into their perspectives about, how well the surgery did, and indeed also what was, but also their perspective on, they see a cumulative number of operations of this specific type, so you can almost access data from them and their perspectives. And what I appreciate about your journey is you've engaged with all elements of the chain and all elements of the clinician base all the way through, which feeds into your expectations, so you get more of a holistic picture. So it is the sleep hygiene, it is the nutrition, but it's also getting perspectives from valued clinicians that are seeing these injury types consistently, and all that goes to inform your mindset. Could I get you to speak to that?
Yeah, no, yeah, oh, no, big shout out for my surgeon. He won't mind, Ali Noorani. He's definitely looked after me for a number of years now. And I said to him, I've got somebody who who I friend of a friend really that has had this surgery, and he's playing rugby already. And he was like, Mike, you're not a professional athlete. You can't be going there. Your job depends on you working for many, many years to come. He doesn't need you to do the starting lineup next Saturday. That's and so he wants my my shoulders, my biceps to be great in 30, 40 years time. And I think that's what I've kind of really thought about my rehab and my journey going forward now, is that period of, God forbid, we can't control, what happens, we might, get injured in a road traffic collision, but what we can do is, that's not our control, is it? But what's in our control is having this whole holistic journey of, what we're talking about, the diet, the sleep, the exercise, looking after yourself, the mindfulness as well, making sure you've got those good connections, those good friendships, those good peer support groups at work. That is going to help us longevity going forward, many, many years to come. So yeah, just that's what I probably like to think is that, Moon.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And like you said, the peer support I think is fundamental actually as well, because you can actually really resource your community to both encourage you, but also just to keep in touch with the workplace, what's happening at work, but also just stay accountable. You mentioned this offline about accountability, and just in a way making sure that there is accountability around you, just that you're making the right steps, you're taking the right measures to on your rehabilitation journey. Could I get you to speak to, if this you to really pivot and actually ask you around, if you could design an ideal rehabilitation program for the staff, just thinking unconventionally, actually, Mike, are there any things you'd speak to just to really help listeners think differently about rehabilitation? Is there any elements of a rehabilitation program just to think, yeah, outside the box, really, that they should maybe be considering?
I think what kind of has helped me over the years, and I think what is I see in individuals as well, is something that you enjoy and you can follow, and it fits into your kind of work life balance really. Um, you know, I haven't got any kids yet, and I feel that I've got a lot of spare time on my hands really, and I'm very aware that everyone else doesn't have that. I haven't got a great commute. Some days it's further than others. Sometimes it's only 15 minutes. So I know there's a multitude of factors of why somebody can't do something. But if you can fit something in, even if it's like walking to work, cycling to work, or having that 30-minute walk on your day off, whatever, I think if that elevates your heart rate and it gets you training, that's the good thing to do, really. Yeah. And but then I feel that looking forward and whether you want to be doing this in years to come or even you're doing it for longevity of your lifespan. I feel that having a high cardiovascular fitness, so high VO2 max, and then also high strength as well. I think the days for me lifting 1 RMs, even 3 rep maxes are pretty, are going, quite quickly. But we do need to be kind of lifting weights, 8 to plus reps for strength wise. Because if you think about it, if you can't, hold something now, you're not going to be able to hold it in your 50s. If you people do these the 5K runs, the park runs. If you can't do a 40-minute 5K, you're definitely not going to be doing that in 5 to 10 years time. So what's your cardiovascular fitness going to be saying to you in your 50s and 60s and 70s? It's not. You're going to be going backwards, aren't you? So I feel my mindset has definitely changed that. I am looking after, future Mike really. But yeah, no, I think in the gym really, I think my exercises that I probably haven't done over the years is hex bar deadlifts. That's grip strength is really important, especially for pre-hospital staff. We know going back to injuries and also kind of lifting aids. When we started and we didn't have those carry tracks, did we? Down the stairs. A box step up. How important. I'm not talking about a Reebok step, but something about like 20 inches. Because if you can get up on top of a box, that you could pretty much get yourself off the floor. So having that functional approach in the gym, yes, we all want to go there and a certain aspect. If you want to go there to look good, that's awesome. That's great as well. But you want to go there to improve your mindset and also improve, your tendons, your muscles, your strength, in many years.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So there's two things I really like about what you just said. One is longevity and just thinking about the Mike Palmer or the Iron Walker of 10, 15, 20 years down the line. And I think that's powerful. And the other thing you just said, which I think is really powerful as well, is integration. So integration of exercise within the work pattern. So like say commuting to work on a bike or running or walking to work or something whereby you can integrate exercise into your daily routine. So it sometimes is an additional, like you said, you might go to the gym after work, but actually if you can integrate, then actually you're already starting to get some of that cardiovascular exercise within your working day. And I think those two pivots, the longevity piece and the integration piece, are fantastic actually. And also flip the narrative so that you can actually think about exercise differently. If you're walking or running or cycling to work, it's a necessity to get to work, but you're also getting that cardiovascular exercise, which I think is fantastic. Just as we finish off, Mike, the final question really would be around if I could just get you to speak to advice you give to staff really just struggling with injury and or psychologically, burnout or otherwise, and they're unsure where to turn. Could I get you to speak to maybe some thoughts from you around resourcing the wider community and or otherwise to really help on that journey?
Mm. I think I think you always have to have somebody there for you as well in your on your side. And I think helped me for years now is that having that friend at work, and it doesn't really have to be your service. It can be a different service. What I have struggled previously is that I'm driving home from work. I've had a bit of a bad day or job, and I kind of want to talk to somebody about it. If I don't speak to somebody about it who's not in our profession, it's really hard sometimes. Sometimes it helps to have a different point of view in it, but then you're trying to explain the job, and then you're trying to explain acronyms as well, trying to put everything in context. But then I think what's helped me is having that work friend to call and who knows you deep down and knows when you're not right as well. And I've got that person, and he's absolutely great. And I just feel like having that perspective of somebody else and just to kind of get something off your chest is really important. And I know I've held stuff on my chest for years before, and it's not easy to talk about. But then when you do get off your chest, it's just you're like a different person. So I think yes, you can turn. You've got the Mind UK blue light program. You've got your peer support, your trim. people at work to go to, with counsellors, saying to the podcast regarding what an amazing podcast with Lisa and Chris was this week as well, and certain aspects of that to kind of turn to is really helpful. But initially, just even speaking to one person, I think that's really helped me and getting things off your chest.
Yeah, it's powerful. And as you said, someone who knows you and actually speaks the same language as you, and that sounds alien to say that, but understands the acronyms, understands the work pressures, understands the environment and the internal pressures of that environment. I think that's powerful. But also something you just said there, which I think is key, is understands you at baseline. So understands you when you're not yourself, because they have a good appreciation of your baseline, of your normal self. And I think that's powerful because they can pick up on the subtle nuances that maybe others can't, and relate to you on that deeper level. So I think that's excellent advice, actually, Mike. Mike, listen, thank you for the last half an hour. It's great just to unpick your journey. You're no stranger to the podcast, but we will be having you back on to speak about something very different soon. But listen, thank you for your time today.
No, I loved it. Thanks, Owen.
You're listening to the Pre-Hospital Care podcast on the Medics Academy Network.